Hey kids, Flexing Teacher Weber here with the second video on subtracting integers. Now in the first video, we looked at what happens when you subtract a positive. When you're subtracting a positive, it's like adding a negative. Subtract a positive is like adding a negative. Subtract a positive is like adding a negative. So we did questions like that, and we did another set. Subtracting a positive is like adding a negative. So we did come up with a rule that subtracting a positive is the same as adding a negative. Okay, what I want to do in this video now is talk about what happens when you subtract a negative. Okay, so let's model this out using our positive and negative integer model. So we're going to start off with 4 positives, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're going to take away 2 negatives. The problem, there are no negatives to take away. So we might want to do this. But then what we're actually doing is adding 2 negatives, and the question says subtract 2 negatives. So how can we make negative 2 appear without actually having 2 negatives? Add 0 pairs. What I've just added here is a 0. So I haven't actually added negative 2, but now I have 2 negatives I can take away. And look at what I'm left with. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The answer is positive 6. So subtracting a negative is just like adding 4 positive plus positive 2. It's just like adding a positive. 4 plus 2 equals 6. I remember it by remembering the 2 minus signs in the middle can form to make a plus. Let's look at another one. Positive 3 take away negative 5. Well, how will I show positive 3? There's positive 3. Take away negative 5. That's not right, though. That's adding negative 5. So how do I show taking away negative 5? Without actually... How do I make negative 5 appear on the screen without actually having a value of negative 5? With every negative, I put a positive. Now what I actually have here is 0. So now I haven't added negative 5, I've added 0, and now I can take away 5 negatives. 1, oops, I'll make that smaller. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And what I'm left with there is 3 plus 5 equals 8. So really, subtracting a negative is just like adding a positive. Do one more. Positive 6 take away negative 2. Well, let's model out positive 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I want to take away negative 2. The problem is I don't have 2 negatives to take away. So the first thought is to add 2 negatives, but that's not what the question says. The question says take away 2 negatives. So I want to make negative 2 appear without actually having 2 negatives. So I put 0 pairs. All of this equals 0. So I haven't actually added negative 2, I've added 0. And now I can take away 2 negatives. Take them away, and what I'm really left with is 6 and positive 2, or 6 plus 2, and that equals 8. And that's the same as that, so that equals 8. So when you're subtracting a negative, it's just like adding a positive. Let's look at one more situation like this. Negative 3 take away negative 5. Okay, it's similar to the last one, but not exactly the same. So I'm going to model this out. Oops. I'll have 3 negatives. And I want to take away 5 negatives. Well, I actually have some negatives I could take away, but I don't have enough, so I'm going to make all 5 negatives appear that I want to take away. But again, that's not right, because that's adding 5 negatives, and I want to subtract 5 negatives. So the way I make 5 negatives appear without actually having a value of negative 5 is I make 0 pairs. There's a 0 pair. That's 0. And now I can take away 5 negatives. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so let's take a look at what I'm left with now. What I'm left with is I'm left with negative 3 and I'm left with positive 5. So I'm left with an adding question. It's exactly the same as before. Subtracting a negative is the same as adding a positive. So now if I look at this with the integer model, right, I have 3 negatives that will make 0 pairs with 3 positives. And I'm left with positive 2. That's my answer. And if I look at it just with the rules, I have 3 negatives and 5 positives. The signs are different, so I subtract, and the answer is positive 2. So subtracting a negative is the same as adding a positive. Let's look at these last two with just that idea. Subtracting a negative is the same as adding a positive. So this question is really like negative 5 and positive 3. The signs are different. I have a negative 5, I have a positive 3, so I subtract them. And since I have more negatives, the answer is negative. That's negative 2. Same thing right here. Negative 9, take away negative 1. Subtracting a negative is the same as adding a positive. So I would rewrite this question as negative 9, positive 1. The sign in front of the integer goes with the integer. 9 negatives and 1 positive. The signs are different, so I subtract. Since I have more negatives, the answer is negative. So, the second rule we've encountered when you're subtracting a negative, is the same as adding a positive. So a negative and a negative together make a plus. And the other rule we have, subtracting a positive is the same as adding a negative. So if you have a minus a positive, you can just make that an adding a negative. That's the true rules you'll need to do the integers assignment today. I hope that helps. That's all for now. Flexing Teacher Weber, out.